Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, great. I'm gonna go over a high-level overview of what this course is, and after that, I'll answer any questions that you all have. Let me pop out this chat. Okay. So yeah, the course is about kind of getting into data engineering or trying to break into a tech-forward data engineering job. So let's start with what you will learn the course. Okay, so this is a high-level overview of what you will learn in the course. There are four distinct sections. So the first section would be how to process data and write clean code. So you'll learn about Python for data engineering, the different libraries we can use from Python, SQL, advanced SQL concepts like Windows, CTEs, how to kind of break down a problem in English and how to convert that into SQL queries, how to analyze query planners. We will go over some Unix commands and concepts because a lot of concepts apply to other systems as well. And then we will see how to kind of analyze data quickly, look at what the columns are in a text file, etc., using Unix. And then we'll see distributed data processing. So we'll cover concepts like partitioning, clustering, bucketing, narrow wide transformation, how to analyze the query plan, etc., all using Spark. We'll see how to write clean code. So you can write a script and how to make sure it's extensible, modifiable, easy to understand. We'll go over testing your code. We'll go over stream processing. The next section would be data system design and data modeling. So we'll start with how to think about designing data systems, how to model your data, how to use dimensional modeling, and kind of the bronze, silver, gold, or base, source base, MART type data flows. And then we'll look at data quality. What does that mean? How to implement it? How to analyze the results of data quality. We'll go over data ingestion patterns to analyze what sort of data sources we have and how to pull out data from there. So some sources you can replace, some sources you cannot. We will look at all the combinations there. And then how to create data pipelines in your orchestration system. So for example, if you're using Airflow, how do you use execution date? How do you pull data only for a period of chunk at a time, etc. And then we'll finally go over some data visualization techniques using like a dashboard tool. The third section is going to be data infrastructure. So as you go through these sections, we'll build a project. We'll build two projects, and then in the data infrastructure section, we'll see how to deploy them to AWS and Databricks and Snowflake, because the two projects, one is in Spark, the other one is in DBT. And we will see how to set them up with Terraform or infrastructure as code, and then we will dig into what CI/CD means and how to implement them with either GitHub Actions or DBT Cloud. Once you have these three sections, you will build your capstone project. While we will use TPCH data for the projects as part of the course. For the capstone project, we will use AdventureWorks, which is another kind of normalized data set. You will consider that as your input, and then we will build our warehouse system. The final section is interview prep. So this will be where we go over data structures and algorithms for data engineering, how to think about data system design, what are the patterns and concepts you should know, go over behavioral interview, and finally, more importantly, how to actually get referrals and land interviews, because you can apply to hundreds of jobs, but you might not be able to land an interview because the resume is getting filtered out or something like that. So we'll see how to actually get referrals. I'll stop here if you have any questions before going on to kind of the tool section. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seems like there are no questions. So while we looked at the concepts, we are going to be using the key tools that are required and are leading in the industry right now. So we'll use Spark and Snowflake. We will look at how to use grid expectations both in DBT and in Spark system. We'll deploy it on Databricks and AWS. We will use Airflow for one and DBT for another for orchestration, and it will all be set up with Docker containers, and we'll use GitHub Actions for CI/CD. Data code for asks, you are going to cover incremental ingestion. What about micro batching? That's a good question. So incremental ingestion will be part of the data ingestion patterns. So there will be snapshot type ingestion, incremental ingestion, time chunked based ingestion, a look back type ingestion. So those will be the four ingestion patterns we'll cover. Micro batching, that will be considered as part of data stream processing, because when people say stream processing, they can either mean like real stream processing like Apache Flink, which we will see, which will cover most of it, and also kind of micro batching type streaming like what Spark does. But with streaming, it's a different pattern because we have to understand the trade-off between state and memory, and then how joins and how group bys and those sort of functions work. So TLDR, yes, we will cover that. All right. So the tools are pretty straightforward. We'll use the most in-demand tools. These are based on jobs requirements for data engineers. So if you look at jobs these days, it's either Spark, Airflow, or Snowflake DBT. So we'll cover all that. And the two projects that you will build along these sections in the workshop will be using Spark and Snowflake. All right. Okay, so the next part is, what does this workshop look like, right? Like, so you have 3 weekends where we'll learn all these concepts, which is great. We will kind of cover that. We'll walk through it together. But that's the first part, right? You cannot, it's almost very rare to kind of immediately get a job in 3 weekends, right? You have to put in the work to actually land interviews, build data portfolio first, land interviews, and crack your interviewing. So once you have this knowledge, you have to kind of start applying that. You cannot, I wouldn't recommend thinking, oh, I would learn for 3 months and then start applying. I'll learn for 6 months and then start applying. You get 3 weekends, you will know what to do and how to do it, and then you build data portfolios to kind of practice what you have learned. And we will go over how to build data portfolio depending on your interested industry and depending on the job you're looking for. And then finally, you have to start getting referrals. I would say like after the 3rd weekend, kind of start building data portfolio maybe for like a week or 2, and then try to start getting referrals. We will see how to get referrals through meetups, through LinkedIn reach outs. There's a technique to do that without just like saying, hey, this is me, get me a job. And then, as we saw in the final section, we will go over interview prep. Interview prep is a bit different. You have to repeatedly practice, especially if you're not really good at data structures and algorithm. It requires a lot of practice. Data system design, it's a little bit better because it is a little bit similar to real life, but not as complex. It's more high level. It'll be more high level. So if you are good with the data system modeling and section, you should be able to go through the data system design, but we'll look at kind of the patterns and the thought process of companies asking these questions, right? So learning 3 weekends, looking for jobs, I would say at least 6 months, and especially this is like October, November. companies don't really hire in this quarter, so it'll probably be like in January, February. But start building a data portfolio, start trying to get referrals ASAP. All right. So let's look at some outcomes of the course. So we will use in-demand tools. You will be building projects that you will host on GitHub along with dashboards to show employers. Interview preparation. You will go from requirement gathering to having a fully functional data pipeline. It won't be handed to you. There will be steps that you can follow. And there will be a community support where I'll help you out for at least 6 months, but probably longer. I'm just saying 6 months, just like a random time period, which I assume is going to be the time that you're going to kind of spend looking for a job, but it can be longer. Yeah, so those are what you will get. And yeah, that's about it. You can look at the kind of sections, if you will, of these 5 parts. And yeah, we will host it on Zoom events. That way it's much more easier than YouTube. And what else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. And if you're, one thing I do want to say is, if you're looking for do it at your own pace style stuff, I would wait, because I will do another course where it won't be live. It'll be more like do it at your own pace. The live workshops add a level of kind of interactivity that's really helpful, and I don't want to charge you this much if you're not going to the live part of the, if you're not going to be here as a live workshop. Yeah, do you have any questions? That's right, data code for it. We are going to be using Flink for stream processing, because Flink is real stream processing. You process one record at a time. Guess there are no questions then. Um, yeah, I'll be here for 10 more minutes if there are any questions. If not, yeah, please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'm happy to answer. Just send me an email via my website at startdataengineering.com. Oh, I also forgot to mention there is sample that you can take a look at. Um, there are also prerequisites that I would like you to complete if you're considering taking this course. Do the prerequisites, basic SQL and Python. Um, oh, data code fast. On the infrastructure content, are you going to cover architectural decision use case examples? Um, what can you elaborate on that question? What do you mean by architectural decisions? Architectural decisions and how to approach architecture will be part of the system design um, section, and we will use what we have designed and we will deploy them as Terraform configs. So for example, right, we will build Spark pipelines. How do you deploy it to Databricks? How do you set the cluster configuration? We will do that with infrastructure as code. Does that answer your question, data code foo? Great. Some of the other questions I got via email were PPP and watching it at your own pace. Yes, the recordings will be available. You can watch it at your own pace. However, I recommend kind of being online because that's where you learn and practice at the same time. So you want to make sure you are able to code in synchronicity with while I explain the concepts. That is critical, I think, for learning. The next question was PPP. Not right now. When we have, when I have a recorded only version, then yes. Lethal Nijask, I don't see orchestration. There is data flow orchestration patterns where we will cover orchestration and scheduling with Airflow and with dbt Cloud as well for like two separate projects. Oh, can you not hear me? All right, hold on. How about now? Is it better? Before the bootcamp starts, is there any particular topic you suggest to familiarize? Yes, so then there is a prerequisite section, so basics of SQL and Python. If you click on this link in this product website, you will be taken to a prerequisite GitHub repo where you can spin up a code space and go over basics of SQL and Python. These are system things like how to do select, how to do joins, how to do group bys, etc. And for Python, it will be kind of basic data structures like lists, dictionaries, tuples, and how to manipulate them, how to do looping, how to do if conditions, how to create functions, how to create classes and objects, things like that. So there is a link. Please go over the prerequisites and also install Docker and Docker Compose, Git, and create a GitHub account. We'll be doing a lot of it on code spaces, but for some of the heavier ones, especially things like Terraform and data processing with Spark, we do need local infrastructure because they're really heavy and free code spaces cannot support them, and you don't want to be putting your cloud connections in code spaces. So you will need some sort of environment variables or configurations to connect to your cloud system. It will be AWS, so you don't want to do it on GitHub Spaces. You want to do it locally. So yes, we will need to install all that stuff. All right. That's great, Sandeep. Sorry, I think I had my volume a little bit low. Any other questions? Hey, Levi. Hey, Rishabh. I was just going over the what, meaning the topics, the how with the tools, and the approach, and the timeline. How can I join the workshop? I'll put the contents. There's this page you can go to. I'll put it in the chat. So that's the page where you can go and join if you like. I'll also add it on the YouTube description after this call. Let's see. All right. I'll stay on for another 10 minutes. See if you guys have any questions. If not, thank you for joining and your interest. I really appreciate it. So Lathal asks, will there be a way to ask questions after the bootcamp because I work weekends? Lathal, I think I would recommend waiting for a few months because this is a live workshop, and the idea is you be present along with teaching. That way you can actually kind of get the benefits out there of that. And yeah, the content will be available on the Podia website, which is where I host, so you can watch it. And there's a community where you can ask me questions, and there will be office hours every week, so you can ask me there as well. DCM asks, will there be more cohorts of workshop? That is a good question. I want to see how this one goes, because people sometimes prefer just in person, sometimes prefer more of a recorded versions of it. So I want to see what the interest is. Depending on that, I may or may not have more cohorts. But thank you for asking, DCM. Sandeep asks, are we going to work on projects from scratch, or will you be providing a walkthrough of various sections, or will it be provided with boilerplate code? Yeah, sure. I can kind of show you an example, Sandeep. Let's see if I can open that for you. Alright, hold on. Let me just open the code 1 second. So Sandeep, let's look at a quick example, right? So it's still a work in progress. So if you look at SQL, we'll go over all this content, and then at the end, you will kind of work along with me to build projects step by step. So I will provide some code, but there will also be parts of the workshop where you have to take that code, convert it into, for example, like dbt pipeline. How do you kind of organize it, things like that. So you will do most of it. I will provide the guidance, if that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions with that. So for example, right, like I'll tell you like how to break down a problem, and then I'll give you some time to work on it, and then there will be solutions for it. So it's kind of like a guided workshop, if that makes sense. That way I'm not spoon feeding you everything, or you're not kind of left confused. It's like a middle ground where I give you the direction, but you have to actually code it, and there will be answers as well. Federico Pachi says, sounds interesting. Thanks for making it. Thank you for your interest. I appreciate your time. When does it start again? What's the schedule? Yeah, so it's going to be 3 weekends. It's going to be October 26th, 27, November 2nd and 3rd, and then November 16th and 17th. And it will be from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let me add that here in the web page. Sorry, I missed that. Atish Panda says, if possible, consider PPP. Yeah, that's a good point, Atish. So the reason I don't have PPP at the moment is because the time zone is mostly in America time zone. The hope is once I do this, I will also record a version, and it'll be released as a kind of watch at your own pace style product. And when I have that, I'll do PPP for whatever country you're based on. Sorry, because this is live, I can't really do PPP because it's my time. So I want to make sure, and it's on US time as well, or America time. So let me see if there are any other questions. So Lathal asks, is there any discount available? Not at the moment. I do hope to have something once I have like a recorded version of this, but not with the live workshop, no. DCM asks, will the office hours extend past the 3 weeks of workshop? Thanks. That's a good question. For 3 weeks, there will definitely be weekly office hours. But past the 3 weeks, I hope to have one every bi-weekly or every month. That's undecided, but you will have access to me via the community, which is you will get an invite if you join. Basically, it's like a Podia community where you can kind of ask questions, and then I'll answer them, and anyone in the community can answer them as well or ask anything to me. So yeah, office hours are weekly, 2 hours every. I'm planning to do every Wednesday evening, so it's good for Eastern and Western time in the US, and for 3 weeks. And after the workshop, I hope to do it every 2 weeks or every month. I haven't decided that yet, but yes, I will be also available on like the community side of it. Later, Nijas, with the explosive growth of AI and LLM, how do we stay competitive as data engineers? That's a good question. I think, at least as far as I can tell at the moment, AI is really, really good at helping you with things, but it's not good at building things. So what I mean by that is, if you know what you're building and you know exactly the parameters with which you're building it, you can just use AI to just generate a bunch of code for which it's amazing. But if you don't know what you're doing, so for example, if someone says, "Hey, I need, I don't know, customer report every day," or let's say they say, "Hey, I need customer report every hour." What does that mean? You have to understand the inputs. You have to understand the real requirements. So you have to understand, like, when they say every hour, do they really mean every hour, or do they mean do they want to look at the data every hour? Is the data that frequent? You have to kind of diagnose these facts about what input is available and what the stakeholders are asking, right? That AI, I don't think it can do, at least for a few more decades. I might be wrong, but from what I can tell, it cannot do that. And even after that, you have to understand the nuances in data. You have to understand the upstream process that generate the data. AI cannot do that for you. The code generation part, AI can do that for you really well, right? So I can show you an example here. In one of my posts, I kind of go over how to generate data. So this is a post that goes over how to kind of create data portfolios, right? But sometimes when you don't have data, you can generate fake data, right? But in order to do that, you need to know exactly what you're asking for. You need to kind of be able to interact with the AI in some sense. So for example, right, here I'm asking, oh, I'm building a project for marketing. What does it look like? What does the industry patterns look like? And then from there, I can kind of interact with it to identify what to build and then ask it to build it. So it's almost like a very, very powerful and much better search engine, if that makes sense. So you ask it the question, it responds, you can take it from there. But you cannot tell it like, hey, build me a data portfolio. It's not going to be great. It will do something, but it won't be the right thing, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Lato? One thing I do want to add though is like, there's the reality, there's the perception, right? Reality is it's not there yet. I don't think AI is going to replace programmers. It will make things much faster, building things much faster, which also means more bugs. I don't think it's going to replace programmers. However, there are people in management who believe AI will replace programmers. So people who do that will feel pain in a few months at least, because they will realize that things don't get done on time, or things are bad quality, or things are not doing exactly what they want, and then they will have to kind of reconfigure the whole kind of hiring and team system. But yeah, that's where the problem is. There's the perception and the reality. People saying, "Oh, AI is going to replace everything," and then there's actually people enhancing their workflows with AI. We will see how to use kind of AI systems for building a data portfolio, right? Like, we will have a template, and then we can just use AI to fill in the kind of code, if you will. That way you can kind of quickly build so many data portfolios instead of you having to manually type in, look at the API documents and whatnot. Hope that kind of answers your question, Latel. So Tristan asked, do you have a timeline on when the non-live version of course would be released? Don't know if I can. Yeah, I think a lot of people have asked me that. I get emails about that all the time. Um, I would say sometime end of November or December, probably. Right? It's gonna be. I have to kind of record it. I have to write like the script for it. But yeah, it'll be Thanksgiving-ish or after Thanksgiving. Should be available. Yeah. I can send out. I'll probably send out another email. If you're on my email list, you will get another email as well saying, hey, the kind of non-live version is available. Yeah, the 3 weekend is a long period, but I do believe you need that time. You cannot just do like 4 hours a week, and that's gonna take like so many weeks, and you will lose the momentum. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Tristan. Later asks, what is your experience working with AI engineers and data scientists? What kind of project require you to collaborate with them? That's a good question. I have worked a lot of my jobs involve interacting with data scientists slash ML slash AI engineers, right? The type of projects that require working with them are typically like you give them data, they do some analysis on it. So, for example, I worked in marketing and CRM type data sets. You get the data ready, you make sure it's good, and you meets SLA and whatnot, and then you give it to the data scientist. They run cohort analysis. If it's marketing, they will look at like different segments of market and see how it's performing. They will run some regression analysis to figure out how the revenue is being spent, if the ads are actually working, things like that. And AI engineers, what they typically do is kind of similar, right? So the term AI data scientist is kind of conflicting. Some companies, they do the same thing. Sometimes AI engineers, what they do is take the data you have and build some sort of model and deploy it for real-time use by kind of a production system. So when we say AI engineers, typically it's like people who productionalize the model, which used to be data engineers. I used to productionalize model too, but now they have this whole separate job title for it. And data scientists, they are more on the analytics side. So they analyze the data, they generate insights from the data. So they generate insights. AI engineers actually kind of deploy a system to production. So what kind of projects? A lot, right? Like, it depends on the company. For example, if it's marketing, you want to analyze your ROI and things like that. You have data scientists. If it's like I worked in real-time bidding, you want to make sure that your bidding system works good. It's a vague definition, but depends on the company. You work with AI engineers. I hope that answers your question, Lytle. Tristan asks, yeah, I do agree you need time, but just don't know. I can't commit to 3 weeks. Yeah, no, I agree with that, Tristan. I do understand the 3 weekend might be a lot. So, yeah, I'll definitely have a recorded version. That way, you can do it at your own pace. Muthu says hi. Hey, Muthu. How's it going? What is the start time and end time over the weekend? It's in Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be 12 afternoon to 8 at night. So it's 8 hours. Um, every hour there will be a 5-minute break, and then there will be a 30-minute lunch break. It comes out to around 6.5 hours of just pure class. Um, it is quite a bit, especially with code and concepts, but that push I think is required because I don't want it to be like you do some, then 3-4 days later you do some, and then go on and on. If you push through, it'll help you kind of grasp the concepts better because the concepts build on each other. So when you start with data processing, you'll write some Spark code. When you go to data modeling and data system design, you'll take the Spark code you wrote and kind of split it out to conform to industry patterns. For example, if you have like one script that does your ETL in the data modeling and data system design, you'll split it into bronze, silver, and gold. How to model silver, how to model gold, things like that. So it builds on top of each other. So I think it's crucial that kind of you do it at a stretch. Muthu asks, are any prerequisites required? Yes, there is some prerequisite required. So I have it here. Where is that? Yeah. So if you look at this prerequisite, right, you have SQL and Python basics. Click on that, it'll take you to a repo where you can go over basics of SQL. So things like select, what are tables, group by joins, and Python will be similar basics like variables, data structures, looping, conditions like if else, and then finally functions, classes, and objects. You'll also need to install Docker and Docker Compose. Most of it we'll do it on Codespaces for free, but when you go into like the data infrastructure side of things, you do need Docker Compose because you don't want to be storing your infrastructure secrets on Codespaces. And then Git, you need Git because the code will be on GitHub, so you need to download it with Git or clone it with Git and a GitHub account because Codespaces requires you to have a GitHub account. Data code for it's both Saturday and Sunday, so 3 weekends, 6 days. It's like 2 whole days. You're welcome, Otto. So if you all don't mind, do you mind answering a poll? So I want to understand if you prefer the 3 weekend. Um, uh, so I want to understand if you all prefer 3 weekend intensive live workshop or do at your own pace version. I would really appreciate it if you can kind of answer the poll. That way, kind of I can understand how you guys are thinking about it. Yeah, it is live. This version is live, and there will be community support. Later asked, will there be support for self-paced version later? Yes, there will be community support for at least 6 months for the self-paced version, yeah. But that won't be kind of live support because self-paced is not live. But there will be like, you will be part of a community where you can ask questions, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. The price is there, Jorge. It's 1,000 US dollars. If you click on the join now, you will be able to see that there. Like if you click on the join now, you'll be taken to like checkout, and you can see it here. You are welcome, Jorge. Thanks for voting on the poll, everyone. That's very helpful. Are there any other questions? I mean, it can be anything, course, or anything in general. We have 20 more minutes, so you can ask me anything regarding data engineering or like the data field. Happy to answer. Yeah, that's a good point, Muthu. So as I said before, I will put on PPP, but on after I have the self-paced version, because you probably can't attend this if you're in India because the time is so kind of time zones are way off there. So yeah, that's why I don't have PPP here. Once I have the self-paced version, I'll try to put up some PPP. Are there any other questions? Oh, yeah, Sandeep has a question. As a data engineer, are you responsible for setting up Spark cluster and troubleshooting issues that may arise? That's a good question, Sandeep. It depends on the company. It depends on the maturity of the DevOps team. Typically, in smaller companies, you would be responsible. So I worked at startups, startups from size from like 5 people to 50 engineers. I had to set up my own Spark clusters. I had to kind of create EMR. We were using AWS back then, so EMR clusters, and shut it down without causing any cost issues. So yes, there are cases where you are responsible for setting up Spark clusters. However, these days, kind of data teams are getting more mature, and there's like a kind of branch of data team called data ops, which typically set up Spark clusters in bigger companies. But in smaller companies, you would still end up setting up Spark cluster and kind of spinning it down. One of the reasons why Databricks or these managed Spark clusters are really popular, because Databricks makes that super easy. EMR makes that easy. Not as easy as Databricks, but it's still easy. So that's why these managed versions of Spark are very popular. Does that answer your question, Sandeep? Later asked, how do you get good at understanding vague data sources and then using the data to That is a very good question and very difficult to answer. But I'll give you like a overview, because it's difficult to answer because I don't know what data sources you're talking about, right? So before when you join, right? If you join a company as a data engineer, in my opinion, your first thing should be understanding the input data, right? You need to understand where the data is coming from, how is it generated, what are the caveats to the data, what is the grain of each data set. So I would recommend looking at this thing called, I'll also cover it in the course, but there's this thing called conceptual and logical data model before and ERDs. So you need to understand how data flows logically through the system. For example, in an e-commerce system, customer, seller, product, customer buys product, seller sells product, things like that. You need to understand the logic behind it, and you need to understand conceptually how they interact with each other as well. So look up logical and conceptual data models. You need to understand those two of the input data systems and the entity relationship diagram. So this will be like, how are the tables designed, how do they connect with each other, primary key, foreign key, that sort of thing. So if you understand these three very well, then that will make a lot of things clear. It'll make things like, when a stakeholder asks a question, you'll know like, hey, can this question even be answered? We might not have the data. So if you really need to understand the data sources, logical, conceptual, and ERD for every data source. Understand that, answering stakeholder questions will become easier. I hope that answers your question, Laito. Sandeep asks a follow-up query. How do you determine the size of the cluster to start with? That's a good question. Depends on the size of the input data set. So what you typically do is, when you're developing, you have like a local data set. It's called like local development environment, and then you have production, right? Typically our local data, the one you're trying with locally, is much smaller than production. In bigger companies, you can kind of replicate the environment, so it should be fine. So when you want to decide the size of the cluster, what you can do is you can take the size of data, right? So for example, let's say, I don't know, you're processing 10 GB of data. So there are two options. One, there are like tools online where you can just say, hey, what should my cluster size be? It'll give you an answer. What I typically try to do is I take 10 GB, let's say 10 GB of input data, right? I will look at cluster that can whose memory, combined memory of all the nodes in the cluster is like, I don't know, 30 GB. I'll see if it works, right? So 10 GB, 30 GB. Again, it depends on the type of transformation you do. If you do like lots of Y transformations and lots of cross joins, that might blow up. But I'll try it out with like 3x, and then I'll try 2x, and then 1x, and then kind of use that as the size of the cluster. But when I worked at certain companies like LinkedIn and things like that, they have tools that kind of you can easily kind of determine the size of the cluster. There are lots of free tools online as well, where you can put in the input size. They will give you a rough estimate. Again, it's a little bit tricky because it depends highly on the type of transformations you do, like narrow or wide, or how many joins are there, how many group bys are there. Are you doing like a bad join? Are you doing like a cross join? Are you doing things of that nature? Is the data skewed? Things like that. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. If you start with like 3x and reduce it, see how far you can get it, right? Hope that answers your question, Sandeep. Data Kofu asks, do you have any sense of how much the industry looks at portfolio while evaluating applicants? And I'm assuming it's some sort of certificate, Azure data certificate. So I'll answer the first one, right? If you are a new engineer or have like less than 3 years of experience, industry does pay a little bit of kind of attention to portfolios, right? But here's the thing: you cannot just submit a resume and expect that they will look at your portfolio. One of the key things is like, and I get this a lot. People reach out to me and say like, "Hey, build this product or project. This is my resume. Find me a job." I'm not going to go out of my way, spend my time to find them a job, right? Like that's not how it works. The idea of a data portfolio, right? If you take a step back, what are we trying to convey with the data portfolio? You want to convey that I can do what you're expecting me to do and more. And you have to sell that idea. That's the key idea you're selling, right? And if you're going through a referral, which you should, you are conveying to this referrer. So for example, if you are coming to me, you need to convince me that me spending 5 minutes getting you referred will give me bonus or something, because most companies have referral bonuses, right? So that is the key idea of a portfolio. It's not like using all these fancy tools. It's using just enough tools to show a potential referrer that you're worth it, and they don't have to spend much time. They just have to refer you to a specific job. So let's say you go look at LinkedIn and find a job. You show me the job ID, and you tell me, hey, this is a project I built. This is how the job requirements matches this product or project. Can you refer me to this job and give me that specific link? I will refer you, no doubt, because that's not a lot of work for me. It's super easy. So that's the idea of a portfolio. It's not about like super complex system. It's about getting a foot through the door, if that makes sense, right? Yeah, you would want to use like popular tool like Spark and whatever that job requires. But the idea here is not the complexity, so much the complexity of project. It's more about showing outcome of the project, like what insights you got, and convincing the referrer or the hiring manager that you know your stuff, right? I hope that makes sense with the data portfolio stuff, right? And as you have more experience, it becomes less and less important because you have work experience that you can talk on. So it's more for like the people with less than 3 years of experience. Um, Associate certificate, honestly, in my opinion, I've never considered anyone with a certificate because I don't think that they're very helpful. I know some consulting companies kind of like their people to have that just so they can sell themselves better to their clients, but I've not worked in many consulting companies for a long time, so I'm not. If you're working for like product companies, it's like I personally I don't care. I know most people don't care either, at least in like product-based companies. I hope that answers your question. Will it help you understand the specific tool sets that Azure uses? Yes. Will it help you understand the nuances of data processing, nuances of designing systems for data flow? I don't think so. So it, yeah, that's my opinion on certificates, especially from like the big cloud vendors and Databricks. I hope that answers your question. Data code flow. All right, I got 7 more minutes. If there are no more questions for like 3 minutes, I think we can end the call. You are welcome, Data Code Flow. All right, I think that's all the questions we have for now. Thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate your time. Hope this gives you some idea of what to kind of expect if you end up joining. Yeah, if you have any question, feel free to reach out to me, joseph.machado@startdataengineering.com. Yeah, and I really appreciate your time. Hope you all have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.